We finally did it. We got Eccentric Brewing in the van cave. Welcome, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Thank you kindly.
So everybody knows this is Jagoff over here. That's Tim. Tim's been around quite a bit. And new guy, Aaron Pachlhoffer. We've all been buddies a long time. Met this guy through Tim, and now I'm pretty tight buds with some professional brewers. That's really cool.
Yeah.
So, I was talking to one of the guys today, and I'm like, what are you doing after work? And he's like, yeah, I'm going to mow the lawn and change the light bulbs and do all this wife stuff. What are you doing? Podcast with a couple of brewers.
Hey, this whole thing is just came along really almost by accident. Almost didn't even happen.
I've kind of followed Tim, and I've been kind of busy and all the craziness going on, and I'm really anxious to hear sort of how it all came together and kind of go from there.
And not only did it happen by accident, but then it instantly went nuts.
Yeah, and however, I refused to do so until we tried a little beer. What do we have, gentlemen?
All right.
Well, we saw this in the store the other night, and we just kind of thought that, let's give it a shot. So what we have is this Budweiser copper lager aged in Jim Beam barrels.
Right on. Let's give it a shot. I want to point something out. As soon as I started hanging out with these guys, hanging out with brewers, even when you guys were home brewers, is kind of a strange experience because everybody drinks out of these and puts all the beer out on the table and just sort of passes around and shares, which is a really cool thing. So,
well, I mean, we drink a lot, so you can help limit that by getting a smaller glass size.
Yeah. Not much, but
well, it's like it's like when you're weight training, it's reps over weight. Do more weight, more reps, and
and if you when you come over and drink at my house, or even when I'm getting a beer at the shop, I'll actually go over there and I'll pour half a glass of beer. You don't get near as drunk. I mean,
especially since we make very high alcohol beers by and large, with the exception of maybe one beer. But hey, here's to
get rolling, gents.
Here's to beer life. Cheers.
Let's see what this is all about. Budweiser Copper Lager.
And we wanted to bring this because everybody's going to think when they watch this, oh man, it's a couple of craft brewers, who have a brewery, and they're going to be real big beer snobs, and they're going to hate on Bud, Miller, and Coors, and we're not necessarily about that. A good beer is a good beer. Now, granted, we're not making anything along the lines of a Bud Light, Miller Light, Coors Light type beer, but I thought when Aaron mentioned this, it was a really good idea to bring it because this is not your average Budweiser.
No, it's not.
It's good.
It's actually pretty damn good.
It's really smooth. I think the only thing that I might give a complaint to is that I wish that they had a little bit better barrel-aged character to it, but it is smoother and richer than your average Budweiser. It's got a little hint of vanilla oaky character to it, so obviously it did see a barrel.
This is what I'm talking about.
We're going to geek out on you as far as the science and the art of this goes. I agree with that. I will say that what I was when I took my first drink of it there, I was impressed by all the vanilla notes because that comes from the wood.
Yeah.
But the actual oak character of the barrel is not really there to me.
No,
it's just the wood sugars that you get from it.
Right, and I would assume that what they did was they actually put this in a barrel, or maybe they just chopped up the barrels and threw the chunks in the tank, but they didn't do it very long.
Yeah.
Normally when you'd barrel age a beer, you'd leave it in there for at least a couple months. It's Budweiser's big production. There's no telling how much of this they made as compared to how many Jim Beam barrels were actually available.
Right.
Maybe they were stockpiling them for a year or something. Who knows?
Mm-hmm.
But they didn't barrel age it very long. That being said, I think the beer for me has met expectations. This is actually the best Budweiser I've ever had.
I could get stupid on this beer. It's just fine.
I'm as Tim says, I'm kind of an average Peckerwood when it comes to beer. And I went to a gig one time at a place that had craft beer, and I think I was 2 pints in, and I felt like I had just eaten 3 loaves of bread. So I look at beer 2 ways. There's a beer I'm going to pour and eat with a steak or out of a little glass, being a douchebag with my pinky out with you guys, and there is beer that I'm going to guzzle while on my sailboat or something like that. Very good. I like your style. So what I want to ask you guys first off, is it true, do we have regional tastes in beer? Like there's an old story that Lone Star beer was brewed specifically for, I don't know, whatever, South Texas, West Texas.
Well, Lone Star was brewed in San Antonio.
Right.
But the story I always heard, I think if it's the same story you're talking about, was that when they wanted to make that beer, they hired a brewmaster from probably Germany. I think it was Germany, and the German brewmaster came over. They said, we want you to make a beer for Texas people, Texas taste in this region. And so for like 6 months or a year, he just went around and basically did cultural research and culinary research and all this other stuff.
Isn't most of what we drink the German influenced Mexican beer?
Yes.
That came, I mean, that's kind of our thing.
Decades
ago.
You know, Shiner Bock is technically really not a Bock, it's a
Vienna lager. You
Yes.
told me that. I
Right.
remember that.
And there is, so we get our German influence in our beers two ways, directly from Germany and German immigrants, but also from all of the Germans who fled to Mexico after World War II, and they
Right.
went down there and started making Vienna lagers and different types of lagers, and those became Mexican lagers. Mexican lagers and American lagers are heavily German influenced.
They are, and you know the one thing you can't also discount is the amount of Germans that immigrated to Central Texas in the 1840s,
Right.
Who
which
are
is
still
why we
there.
have
Yeah.
I mean, I think most people in Fredericksburg are still bilingual, and some of the street names are in German as well. It's the only place I can go where people can actually pronounce my last name right on the first try.
Das
I
Pachlhoffer.
got to tell you guys a really cool story about Fredericksburg in the 80s. A buddy and I were going through there. We were on a kayaking trip, and it was college, 1989, 1990, somewhere in there. And we stopped on the main street in Fredericksburg, and there was a guitar shop. And they had, the reason I went in, they had 2 or 3 Martin guitars in there. I'm a Martin fan. They had 2 or 3 Martins in their window, and the guy handmade dulcimers in the back of the shop. And I had never seen a dulcimer. I had no idea what it was. So he whips out this dulcimer and starts jamming. And we were just talking. Just a couple of 3 old ladies walked in, like gray-haired grandmas. I don't remember what they were doing there, but it looked to me like they were just shopping. Like that was their day to go to the bakery and the grocery store, and they just stopped in. And this guy started jamming a song, and they started singing in German. It was like an old folk song. So, yeah, and Tom Arnold, you guys remember him from the Masons, the guy that passed away, talking about, he spoke German, spoke Spanish, spoke German, and he's from New Braunfels.
Yeah.
But when I, if I'm a Bud drinker or Miller Lite, or what am I drinking? Am I a lager guy?
It's
American
a
lager?
Yeah.
American lager.
American lagers.
So is that pretty much the thing? Is that what?
Americans traditionally, until maybe over what you think, maybe the past 10 years, especially Aaron, they've been more lager drinkers than anything. Until the craft beer revolution really started to introduce people to ales.
Rewind that statement about 10 to 15 years.
Mm-hmm.
And so add some more time onto it.
Right.
I think really, you've had a couple of pulses of craft beer brewing, and you had really this initial pulse. It seems like it was almost right around the time that I turned 21. It's really kind of just before it, because I was still begging my mother to buy me beer in the store. I couldn't get any of my friends to go in and say, yeah, no, I want you to get this beer called Brewski Amber. And I shit you not, that was a beer.
Mm-hmm.
I want you to get this beer called Brewski Amber. And then I want you to get me a Sam Smith's Nut Brown Ale, their Imperial Stout, and how about that Pete's Wicked Ale? And they're like, what the fuck, man?
Yeah. What are you talking about?
How about I just get you some Bud, Miller, or Coors? Fine.
Yeah.
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 I remember back in 1993, I went on the police torch run to Austin. It's a big fundraiser for the Special Olympics, and it's the first time I ever tried a Shiner Bock. And I would swear it tastes different today. Now, is that me or is that the beer? Because I understand, a lot of times your taste change. I watch beer drinkers, the old men in my family that maybe they were Coors back in the day, and then I'd see them drink Keystone and move on. What's going on there? Is that a thing?
I don't think it's you. I think China Bock has changed a little bit over the years. It seems like it's gotten a little bit smoother and slightly more mainstream in flavor. It seems like it used to have some heavier caramely notes, some light background toasty
There
notes.
was more of a decoction flavor 20 or 30 years ago.
Correct.
Yeah.
And over time it's gotten almost a little bit more mainstream, but I could also say that for other beers on the market as well. The two that come to mind, namely, is the Sam Adams Boston Lager and also Fat Tire by New Belgium Brewing.
Yeah.
Both of those beers were previously way, way more flavorful. Specifically, Fat Tire had this wonderful chocolatey, bready note to it that just couldn't be beat. And Sam Adams Boston Lager had actually a very, very distinctive and very prominent dry hop note. And they dry hop it with German hops, and that's a flavor that you just can't miss, and it's something that you don't get in the hoppy American beers. It's a real spicy floral note, and when it's done right in a beer, it's fantastic.
Oh yeah, yeah, and that is another beer that has just become a little bit more mainstream as Boston Lager. Still a good beer, but not. It doesn't have that real spicy dry hop note. But I will say this too, that as those beers like Shiner Bock and Boston Lager, as they have gotten more and more popular, you know that the manufacturing processes have had to change. And Aaron and I, over the past, several months to a year, have, had to figure out how do we step up the volume of, like Aaron has been brewing Pig Slayer for over a decade at the 6-gallon level. How do you go from a 10th or an 1/8 of a barrel to 4 or 6 or 7 barrels?
I can tell you.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
You weigh up some malt, mill it, roll the dice, and say, "Let's do it."
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, but we've done a good job, I think, of doing the math correctly and figuring out how to make it still have a very honest craft flavor and a craftable approach.
Well, Tim, you told me once we were talking about brewing, and that's something I've never gotten into. I don't know the first thing about it. I looked at it, I talked to you guys, and I thought, hey, that might be fun. Holy crap, that's a lot of work and a lot of science, and I don't want to screw with it. I'm a collector of hobbies, so I like hobbies like an observatory that can sit there and just wait until, if it's shitty weather and I can't get out there for 3 months, so be it. When I go back there, I flip the switch. Brewing is not like that.
No, it doesn't.
And I remember you told me at a gig one time about wherever we were, it was just like a 3-tap bar, and I think we're probably drinking Miller Lite. That's typically what we go to. And you said that there's a separate artistry in making a lot of beer taste the same way all the time.
Yeah, especially at extremely high volumes. That my respect for the Buds and the Millers and the Coors, especially beers like Miller Lite and Coors Light that are such light, delicate lager beers, is that they can make tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of gallons of that beer, and it all tastes exactly the same.
Yeah,
that takes a lot of technology and a lot of know-how to be able to do that, because beers are prone to flaws, infections, oxidization. The list goes on and on what can make a beer taste wrong. And when the beer is really delicate and it doesn't have a lot of body or a lot of flavor, you are really apt to notice a flaw in a delicate beer, much more than you would in a beer like this that's slightly less delicate. So the fact that they can do that over and over and over again, I mean, that's worthy of a certain amount of respect, whether you drink those beers or not.
I tasted a beer that had been contaminated once. A friend of mine, he brewed in his basement or whatever, and that was pretty rough. And
well, and in many ways, what I kind of the way I view the big boys is they're the McDonald's, Burger Kings, Wendy's of the brewing world. And where can you go where a Big Mac does not taste like a Big Mac, or a Whopper doesn't taste like a Whopper?
Yeah,
so it's the same. It's a good translation, and both the fast food world and the brewing world, they make extreme pains to make sure that wherever you go, you buy the same product.
And it has been shown through market research that a lot of the people who eat at McDonald's, they don't eat at McDonald's because they think it's so great and it tastes so good. If they're in a place that they're not used to, a different town or whatever, and they need something quick to eat, they know if I go to McDonald's or if I go to Burger King, it's going to taste, I know what it's going to taste like. I know I'm going to be able to get by with that, and I like it enough to eat it.
That guy, Steve Straw, that's you've met him. You may have met him. He's a dear old friend of mine. He's a FedEx pilot. Flies all over the world.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
And he actually, no, I'm sorry, it wasn't him. It was another buddy of mine. He's an air marshal. And we had this conversation because this guy he'll go to work and wake up in Dubai or whatever. And he said, it's cool to go sample the local wares and see what's good. Do I really want to try this? And he said, but you got to be on a plane the next day. You don't want to be having a serious case of the squirts or whatever it is. And if there's a McDonald's or whatever, it's there. But so we know a lot about you. We know a lot about Tim. Tim's recording engineer, pro videographer, marketing. You've done it all. You've done a lot of cool stuff. Pro musician. We've been there. Aaron's a geologist.
I am.
Are you master or PhD?
Master.
And your specialty is environmental science, right?
It is environmental science. I can't say that I necessarily started out that way, but when I was wrapping up graduate school and had a kid on the way, I was looking for jobs, and the environmental industry is there's usually always a job in the environmental industry because people are messy little shits, and they can't help but to just make a mess of the world that we live in. And so there's a whole group of people like me who are a little cynical, slightly sardonic, and we just go around like a very well-educated janitor sweeping up the mess.
Right on, man. Well, so being a geologist and geologists are a special kind of scientist, out here in the oil field. So being a geologist, how'd you make the transition from gay porn to brewing?
Well, it wasn't that hard.
I wrote that at lunch. Right?
I'm not sure how to formulate an answer for that one.
So from arm waving geology, science and brewing kind of runs together, right?
I think the science and the basics behind it kind of work together fairly well. It's even more helpful if you've got a background in biology, which I minored in biology for my undergraduate. So a lot of the microbiology aspects are really helpful. And if you ever wonder why I'm so particular about things, it's because you've ever just opened up a petri dish, closed it, and then put it in the incubator and come back a couple days later, and you're like,
yeah, lots of funk.
Yeah. Well, no, and I totally actually, when Aaron and I first started brewing beer together and hanging out together, we met through beer brewing over a decade ago, and my sanitation processes were not what they needed to be, and I thought they were, and I was having more problems with off flavors and stuff 10 or 12 years ago than I do now, and I learned a lot of those good practices actually from guys like Aaron and other really experienced brewers that were hanging around the Brewers Association at that time. And so I never, whenever we're cleaning a tank or getting ready to rack beer or move beer from one vessel to another, and Aaron says, "Hey man, let's sanitize that for 10 more minutes." Hey, it's just 10 more minutes. It ain't and it's a peace of mind. So I've learned a lot of good habits from Aaron, not only just from the crafting process, but just the technical side, the technician side of brewing beer.
Well, the way where I actually met Aaron, Tim would brew, and you guys just show up. Brewers will get together and drink beer, drink your last batch while you're brewing a new one or whatever. Mm-hmm. And I watched you sterilize a container. I was impressed, man. I mean, it was like you were prepping for surgery.
Yeah, you kind of are in a way. Yeah, you want to make sure that those little creatures called yeast that you're going to introduce into that fermentation situation. You want to make sure that they're healthy and happy, and they don't eat the wrong things. And the wrong things aren't in there to eat the sugars in the beer besides the yeast.
The wrong things are in there. It's just the fact of the matter is that you are adding so many yeast to it, and if your sanitation's right, they don't have a good environment to grow in. Everything that's floating around the air all wants to get into that nice, rich, sticky, sweet liquid that you've just spent hours making and mess it up for you.
Exactly.
So, for anybody that's watching video, we have a plate of dead critter out here. When we shot the episode about the fencing club, Eric Keitel brought some Korean barbecue, which we devoured off camera. So I've kind of started a tradition of putting out a snack, especially when we start recording at 5 o'clock in the afternoon. Everybody's showing up off work hungry. And that is some butterflied venison backstrap that I murdered myself this season. So you don't get much more grass-fed, organic, and free range.
And we're about to have some beer from our brewery to go with it. So we have harvested meat from the field, and we have craft beer made from scratch. So
how about that? So I want to ask you guys, this is my main question for anybody who's kind of chased down a dream like you guys have. I've been a pro photographer. That was one of my brief college jobs. And I've been around aviation, and one thing I learned when I became a pilot is that I did not want to be a professional pilot. And photography, it didn't kill my love for it. I just remembered that one day I didn't feel like taking pictures and I had to. How's it going so far with brewing?
Still fun to get into the shop and get it going.
Yeah.
I think for me, the first probably 3 or 4 beers that we did on the system were pretty hectic. I was actually filling out the brew logs the other day. We just finished our 25th batch.
How big's a batch?
Final volume is about 3.5 barrels. It might vary a gallon or two.
Yeah. Our system consistently makes 3.5 barrels of beer at a time.
It's supposed to be 4 barrels, but I don't know where that extra half barrel's gone.
Who knows? Spillage? Or was it what did Jesse Pinkman say in Breaking Bad? Shrinkage, dude. Shrinkage.
we don't lose a lot of beer. I think that just the way the system works, and the way that we have it plumbed, and the way that our procedures work, we just end up with 3.5 barrels of beer.
On.
Yeah, and so that's the volume that system makes, and you know what? That's fine. It makes a lot of beer. When we keg it out, it's 20 kegs of beer. So I have to resist the burping in this.
That's all right. Well, I understand it's a brewer thing, so
we need to just do like Brewing Network and just rip giant.
Yeah, that's cool. I'm totally cool with that, man. I every few podcasts I clean the mic screens of whatever. So yeah,
but yeah, it consistently makes 3.5 barrels. We've just bought new tanks that are big enough that we can actually run 2 batches into the same tank and get it fermented at once, so we could brew back-to-back days and make even more beer, which is great because right now our own personal time allotment, and including my partner who's not here, we can manage 1 brew a week, and we're fixing to make that into 2. Mm-hmm. But we've got to figure out how to make more beer because 1, it's a business. A business needs to grow, but 2, the existing places that we're on tap at, they sell the snot out of our beer, and I can't tell you how many times I've had to say, well, give me about another week.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, we've got this is one of our best sellers. It's an IPA that we just call Typical because we were looking for...
Typical or Pig Slayer?
This is actually Typical.
How many varieties are you making right now?
We're up to 6 at the moment.
Good Lord. Wow. Okay, so if I am... a Bud Light, Coors Light, Miller Lite guy who may or may not be the most adventurous soul, it's going to go to one of the many places that I want to cover, especially at the end of this, where your beer's sold. What do I ask for? What do I want?
Gold.
West Texas Gold Blonde Ale. That's what you want to drink. Yeah.
Fantastic.
Yeah, we had a guy tell us online, he said, this is better than any any Bud, Miller, or Coors I've ever had. And he went on and on online. We just kept resharing all of his comments, and it created a furor over the beer. Then we sold out of the beer, and now we have another batch of it in the bright tank ready to go out. We're going to keg it this week.
Yes, sir. that one broke the. I have too much compression. Yes, sir.
Slow clap.
Slow clap.
Thank you.
Nicely
Thank you.
done.
Very good.
Yeah, so if you're a Bud Miller Coors drinker and you want to latch onto an eccentric beer to find out what we're all about, West Texas Gold is a good place to start, as well as Shrapnel. Aaron and I were hanging out at one of our customers' bars a couple of weeks ago, and
we do that.
We do that. We don't have a tap room right now. We don't want to compete with our customers. We go hang out with our customers. And so Aaron and I were just hanging out in this place. It's kind of a busy place, and there was a dude drinking one of our beers, an amber ale called Shrapnel off of tap, and he's drinking it, and he sits it down, and he makes this wonderful face and is pointing at it to his friends. And I told Aaron, I'm going to talk to this dude. Dude was a little bit lit, he had a few beers, but he was in a good mood, so I thought I could approach him, and I said, hey, man, what are you drinking right there? And he said, man, I don't know. I think they said it was called something like Shiner. I thought it was Shiner, but it's the best damn Shiner I've ever had in my life. And I was like, that's called Shrapnel. He said, yeah, that's it, Shrapnel. I said, me and this guy right here, we're the guys who brewed that beer.
That happened to me in Fredericksburg. There's a really cool place right off the main drag. My wife would know the name of it. It's a burger place. Kind of a comfort food joint, wooden floors, indoor and outdoor section.
That's like my type of place.
It is badass. And I was in the mood for a brew, just whatever. And I'm looking at their bar, and it was a Sunday, like right after church, and it's busy. And whatever. I can't remember.
In Fredericksburg.
Yeah, hard to find.
Baptist jokes.
Yeah, and whatever it was, I found. I go, yeah, I'll have that one. And this guy standing next to me paid for the beer, and he was the owner of the brewery.
Very nice.
Yeah. And now I feel horrible that I can't remember. I'll write it down. I know the can when I see it. It kind of looked like a Schlitz can from a distance, But
it's Pedernales Brewing.
Yeah, it might be Pedernales if it looked like a Schlitz can.
I think so. Yeah, there was a gold. It was a lager. It was a really good lager that they made. So, man, that's cool, guys. The last I was thinking about it. I remember two local brewers, both in the '90s. One was West Texas Amber, and I talked to Tim. Do you remember that, Aaron?
That actually precedes me.
Okay.
With my time in Midland.
Those guys, I was doing the grunge band thing, and it was in a lot of the clubs that we went to and played, and it came and went, and it was a good beer, and it was
I had heard that it was all right. Oddly enough, I think about 2 years ago, for the Basin Brewers Facebook page, they have that to where you have to request to join, and now they have a couple of questions, the password. But so you have some questions to answer when you join the page, because they just try to keep the spammers out. I can't tell you how many sunglass and mobile home salesmen we've booted.
We're
off
already
of there.
seeing that, yeah. On for the Van Cave, we're seeing
Van
that.
Cave Facebook page,
exactly.
Which you guys all need to go like.
But there was a guy who requested to join, and it said, "Do you currently brew?" He said his thing said, "I used to make West Texas Amber. I was thinking about bringing it back."
Oh wow,
interesting.
I'm hard pressed to tell you who it was. I know I shot him a note that I can't remember if he answered or not. So if I have, like a day to go back through my old Facebook messages, I could figure out who that was. And then also prior to West Texas Amber, I believe actually the company was called Basin Brewing. Prior to West Texas Amber, there was Herman's Hofbrau.
I've played a lot of gigs
Aaron,
at Herman's.
I was going to say.
I lived right across the street from there. Yeah. Actually, I lived at Herman's Hofbrau, but I slept in an apartment across the street.
Nice, very nice. I'm sure they appreciated that too.
Yeah.
They did. I knew Herman's was going south when we played a gig there one night, and there were, our band was kind of whoever showed up.
Oh, that's awesome.
It was one of those bands, and a girl I was dating and her best friend and like best friend's cousin and another guy's wife or girlfriend were there, and we wound up with this table full of gorgeous women. And 2 or 3 days later, I saw one of the tag-along girls at work or something. She goes, "Hey, I really appreciate you guys picking up our tab for us." And I said, "The fuck you talking about?
We're musicians. We don't pick up anybody's tab."
Yeah, we got $75 for whomever showed up per musician and a meal, and all the beer we could drink. So at age 23, you know, that's a good deal. That's a good deal.
$75
and
is a lot.
what it was, they had a bunch of waiters that were macking on the girls, and they just didn't bother to ring them up. And shortly after that, the doors closed, and Hermann's Hofbrau was no more.
Well, the way that Hermann's Hofbrau ended was it's a weird story, and we probably shouldn't go into it too much. But I will say this. I was playing in a band at the time called the Atomics, and one of the guys who was working as a promoter for us, he was a really good promoter, ended up buying Hermann's when it went out of business. He bought it lock, stock, and barrel because that dude basically skipped town.
Right.
He left the brewing system in place. He left everything in place. And this friend of mine ended up with all of it, and he had it in a warehouse in southeast Midland for over 20 years. Well, it just so happens that when Eccentric Brewing started, Aaron ended up buying all of that gear. We still have some of it, but he and Jamie ended up reselling most of it to buy the system we're on now. So we have a weird connection to Hermann's Hofbrau in that we still have a bunch of the equipment from the original brewery at our brewery.
All the kegs we have for them still have a little plaque, and that must cost them a fortune. Have a little plaque right by the tap that say Hermann's Hofbrau, Midland, Texas.
Yeah, wow.
I'll tell you one of the coolest things.
Bunghole kegs. You don't see bunghole kegs anymore.
No, you can't sell.
I'm not gonna ramble on too many war stories, but I'll tell you the coolest thing about that place. I have never hung out in a bar regularly my entire life. Not that I'm too good for it. It's just not my thing.
Yeah, not my thing either.
But it was right across the street, and it was one of those deals of nothing's good on TV. Wonder what's going on over there. And that's where I learned, got into cigars a little bit and all. And I went over there, and one of the dudes that hung out there worked at the planetarium. And the planetarium, all of them, and they're specific systems with specific projectors and the way they're set up. And so the programs that are sold to the planetariums, they're really expensive. So to decide, if you're a planetarium director, to decide what program you want, they send you VHS tapes that show just, this is what it's about. And
like the Pink Floyd laser light show.
Yeah. Yeah. Cause it'll run the actual star projector, and if they have multiple, individual projectors, it would show those. And so what you're showing your people. The dude would bring those to the bar, and they would put them in, and we would all sit and drink craft brew and watch that.
Very nice.
And, a guy, it was a surreal moment, because here's the bartender, and he's this, really overweight, mustachioed guy wiping down the bar, if he was even wiping down the bar. I don't know. It got kind of grimy at one point, but this little kid was watching that. There were kids there. This is like a British pub, there's people eating a hamburger and drinking beer. Yeah. And this little kid says, "Daddy, what's the little tiny 12 next to the 10? And it was scientific notation, 4.3 times 10 to the 12th power. And the guy wiping the bar goes, well, child, that's called scientific notation. And he explained it very well. And I'm like, this is my kind of scum. This is my kind of place. And it's a shame that Hermann's, it was management and a lot of unfortunate stuff that it went down. But I'm so glad to see you guys making beer locally.
So Thanks. Are we?
Yeah. It's it takes up, well, I was gonna say it takes up all of my Sundays, but usually this is a 7-day week job. I mean, there's virtually no days off.
Yeah,
I've noticed
it's not just brewing beer.
Getting Tim in here, because when I put this project off, man, Tim is hot and heavy for it, and we've got the band, and we're still doing stuff with that. And suddenly Tim, of course, Tim's always worked for himself for the most part, and doesn't have the kind of schedule that I do, being just an office guy. But you guys have been busy.
We have been, yeah. It's about like Aaron had to order malt yesterday, so because we've been brewing so much that we'll be out of malt. If we don't have malt by Friday, we can't brew. We're going to try to brew twice this weekend, and between then, I've got to go in and get kegs ready so that we can. Here's how it works: we have to get the kegs ready, turned around as we call it, where they're sterilized and ready to accept beer. empty the bright tank and fill all those kegs up and label them. The bright tank is where we take the finished fermented beer and we clear and carbonate it.
Okay.
And once it's cleared and carbonated and ready, it goes into kegs, and those kegs are labeled and they go out for sale. But before that, we've got to keep this beer moving through vessels. It's like it's literally a rotation. And so before we can brew, we have to make sure that we have a free fermenter. So to do that, you've got to take the beer that's in the fermenter, you've got to move it into the bright tank, you've got to turn around the fermenter and clean and sterilize it so that you'll have a place to put your beer on the brew day. So it's not just brewing beer, not to mention that we have to service accounts. We just picked up a new account this week. And so it's growing. It's something that I see by the end of this year, it's going to be we're going to be pulling our hair out in a good way, which will be a good thing.
That's cool.
Well, and you know, we just bought more tanks, and we've got to get the cooling system right for the tanks, because you can't just let this ride at room temperature. It has to be the beer actually has to ferment at a very specific temperature, about mid-60s for ales, low 50s for lagers. So you have to keep it at the right temperature. And to do that, you have basically it's a air conditioner for liquid. It's just a liquid chiller, and it circulates it through the jackets on these tanks. But we've got to get the cooling system right, because we spent all our money on the tanks. We didn't have enough left over for the glycol chiller.
So we made a Franken chiller.
Yes,
for one of them. Yeah.
We cannibalized a window unit, AC, and put it into a cooler with a glycol bath.
Right on.
Found a fountain pump, and that's what's circulating the liquid. And our initial tests on it are looking pretty good, actually.
Mm-hmm.
So what's been the weirdest, like the most surprising part from being the incredible home brewers that you are to being professional brewers? What's been the strangest or the most surprising?
That it sells as fast as it does.
Yeah, that's it for me too. I can't believe it took off the way that it did and how fast it did. By this time, you know, I think the early talk was that, hey, we'll be at, you know, after 9 months, we'll be at 3 places. That'll be great to be at 3 or 4 places around town. We're at 9 right now.
Wow.
It's exploded. And so that's the thing for me. There was a hunger. There was a thirst.
He said the thing.
So to speak. I said the thing, yeah.
The thing. What,
there,
is it a safe word?
Yeah, there was a legitimate want community-wide for local beer. And we're the first ones to do it in a long, long time, and it has overwhelmed us in a very good way.
Well, and I think that I knew the thirst was there. I mean, because you can't discount the success of places like the Beer Garden, Tilted Kilt, which has a great tap selection, Little Woodrow's, now Woody's Hideaway. One of our other accounts, Buffalo Nickel, has a significant number of taps. The people Grub Burger, who just picked us up the other day, They have probably 15 different taps. Johnny Carino's here about 1.5 years, 2 years back. They totally redid their bar, and they went to 50 beers on tap and 50 bottles.
Jeez.
Yeah.
So you can't discount the fact that craft brewed beer is in definite demand in Midland, and Odessa.
It's in demand. I mean, everywhere, all over the place.
It's a wonderful thing because it's like when I go to a town to visit, I don't want to go to, like this summer, my wife and I went to South Dakota. We stayed in Rapid City, we went to Sturgis, we went to Deadwood, we went to Badlands, we did all the stuff, Mount Rushmore, blah, blah, blah. Okay, I wanted 2 things. I wanted local food. I wanted the mom and pop restaurants that really made the good local food.
Oh, in South Dakota, that's pretty painful, isn't it?
Well, no, there's some good ones. Now, there were some bad ones, but I also wanted the local beer, and I found a local beer called Lost Cabin there that's doing exactly what we're doing at Eccentric Brewing. They are only available in restaurants on tap, or at they actually have a tap room, though, which is one thing that we don't have at this point. But they are in the exact same position that we're in that they are struggling to keep up with demand just in southwestern South Dakota. They're in all those little towns are kind of packed in there closely together.
Yeah, there's not a lot of people there, but there's a lot of tourists in the summer, and of course all the tourists. And by the way, I was in Rapid City and Deadwood, and
yeah, you were.
I think I was there probably 2 or 3 weeks before you.
Yeah,
but the first thing I did was popped up my phone and started looking for the local breweries.
Yeah. It's the same thing. It's part of latching onto the culture of wherever you are. You want to taste, you want to meet the local people, you want to taste the local food, you want to drink the local beer. And I love, by the way, Lost Cabin beers. Those guys are at a really high level of craft beer making. They're freaking awesome beers. Didn't have a single one I didn't like. My only regret was that we didn't have time to hit their tap room and actually meet the guys. But that is something that I think it would be great for more West Texas towns to have.
Oh, yeah.
There's a little bit of it in Lubbock. There's us here so far. Now, there's some other guys working on some craft beer here, but they're not ready yet. And I'm sure it'll be good beer.
Big Bend's gone.
Big Bend is gone. We can. Well,
I'm hoping they'll make it back. They may not. We don't know,
Yeah.
but I hope they make it back.
It's up in the air right now. Yeah, they got into a real bad situation.
That's good to hear. I was going to tell you before I forget. I got off the plane and my wife and I went to Chicago, and there was a company that was the area code. I can't remember, like 432.
Probably 312.
312, yeah, and the tap was a phone. It was like an old vintage phone receiver.
Yeah.
And I thought,
312. That's Austin.
312.
No, 512.
Oh.
Well, there's 512 in Austin.
Oh,
I
that's what
saw
I'm thinking of.
whatever the hell this was. And it was Chicago.
Okay.
And it was at the airport, and I asked the kid at the bar, what kind of beer is that? And he told me, I go, let me try one. And he poured it, and here I am in Chicago, and he was like, yeah, that's my sister's cousin's dry cleaner's niece's dog groomer's brother. Yeah, whatever. Which was, in a city the size of Chicago, what are the chances?
Yeah, I bet he said he was an awesome home brewer too.
It was a good beer. It was okay, and I saw the tap in a couple other restaurants. I was there to see the New Zealand All Blacks play the USA Eagles, and
rugby.
Yeah, within 2 years, I saw those telephone taps everywhere I went with every area code in the world. So you guys want fresh glasses, or are we good to start?
I don't know. Give us probably on that. Give us about 6 months. By the way, Peckerwood, I brought you a gift.
You son of a bitch.
Stella Artois. Golf clap.
Oh, you you have to watch the previous podcast.
I bought that for you special.
This is an inside joke right here.
So it's not an inside joke because it happened on the air.
It did.
It was a few episodes ago, and I've got a selection of different beer. I just buy variety packs. Yeah.
Yeah?
When it didn't fizz and it looked weird, I knew what you were up to. Here, would you like some water?
Yeah.
Because it's literally water. See what Aaron did there?
How could you tell the difference?
This fucking guy.
It had one of our caps on
Right,
it.
okay.
Yeah.
So Tim goes to get himself a beer, and just that day he grabbed a Stella Artois out of the
Let me
fridge.
have some Stella.
Yeah.
And his brewer buddies did not let it down. So Tim has been digging in the fridge for the weirdest thing he could find. This is epic, Aaron. Thank you so much for this.
Yeah.
That was
My
beautiful.
pleasure.
So great. Now, actually, this serves a functional purpose because it allows us to rinse our glasses before we have some eccentric beer. Yeah.
It's rather serendipitous.
Yes, absolutely. So
I'm down.
All
So
right.
what are we about to try?
Okay, so I ran by the brewery on the way while Aaron was going to the store to get that Budweiser specialty beer, and I just drew this off of our sample taps. This is a typical IPA. This is Aaron's recipe. So far, all the recipes are Aaron's, though he and I are collaborating on a badass beer that's going to be coming out here pretty soon for summer, an Imperial IPA.
Be before summer.
It will be before summer because we're going to brew it not this week, but next week, right?
Probably next week because I don't think the hops are going to make it for this weekend.
Okay.
I had to
It's
branch out to
It's a lot of hops, dude.
Well, I had to branch out to a different supplier because our regular supplier didn't have everything that I wanted.
Okay.
So I was like, where the
Yeah.
fuck can I find all this?
Yeah, well, we obviously don't reveal any of our recipes. Those are very closely guarded
I
trade
understand
secrets.
that.
But I will tell you that it is a metric ton of hops that's going to go in this beer. It's going to be
So
awesome.
IPAs and all are kind of the thing now, right?
Yeah.
Is that what's...
Yeah.
And so, we're pouring an IPA for you, and
this is very typical of what people want in craft IPAs, which is why Aaron named it typical.
right, and of course, and the other thing is what's really distinctive about this beer is it's the first unique beer brewed on the system, and it's not a recipe that I took and recycled from the house. Which isn't to say that the recipes that I recycled from the house suck. They're actually, all those actually sell very well, but this one was the first unique recipe, and it was actually wrought from screwing up while weighing malt.
Right on.
And it still made a great beer, and so we make it all the time now. It's actually become one of our best sellers. We've been having trouble keeping it on tap. It is a very floral, perfectly balanced as far as the malt character.
Citrus
IPA.
hops. Some citrus in there?
Citra hops. Yep, you guessed it. Well, I won't tell you what any of the other hops are, but yeah, Citra is in there. Damn, we're making some good beers in Midland, Texas.
I am not an IPA fan. That is my favorite IPA, and let me explain why. Maybe it's just me. And again, regular jagoff here. Don't know a lot about beer. Most IPAs come across as sticky and syrupy tasting. That's just how it hits my palate. I like the kind of dry, crispy nature of the lagers and such. That has that hoppy, nose blasting
aroma.
Just that the aroma, but it's not the sticky syrupy thing.
Well, and the other thing that it doesn't have is it doesn't have that huge bitterness that just bitch slaps you.
Right. Did what I say just make sense to
Makes
you guys?
perfect sense.
I know exactly what you're
I don't know
about.
I don't know any of the technical terms.
So one of the things that we've done in America that I don't want to call it a crime because some of the beers are very, very good, but what we call IPA in America is not an IPA as it all started out.
No, the traditional British IPAs are radically different. They're not as bitter. The hop flavor they're not as malty. The hop flavor is actually totally different. The British hops tend to be real grassy, kind of herby, a little bit of floral in there, but not this big, huge citrus awesomeness, really, if you think about it.
I have to ask a question. Did you guys, were you kind of shooting for the rainy desert sage? Where you think that's what it tastes like to me, that scent.
Might be why people like it so much.
Yeah, if you've ever been some places in the desert out here right after the rain, you can smell the creosote, and you can smell that sage. This is magnificent, gentlemen.
I went to school in Alpine. I've been all through the desert.
Yeah. On a horse with no name?
Yes.
It was good to be out of the rain.
Yeah. That's never mind. I'm not going to go into the lyrics of that song because they make no sense.
No. Dude, we do.
That dude was out in the desert that whole fucking time, and he didn't have time to name his horse.
And he couldn't wear couldn't wear clothes or sunscreen.
Yeah.
Come on, dude. We play Cortez the Killer.
That's
There's
true. There's no greater revisionist history in lyrics than Cortez the Killer.
This is really good.
Thank you.
I'm liking it, man.
We're having to brew the way we're having to do everything right now. I mean, Aaron's got to work around his job as an environmental scientist. I have to work around my multimedia and social media management and marketing business. So we're doing a lot of stuff on the weekends and a lot of stuff at night, but we're keeping up and we're having a good time. Like every morning, every Sunday morning when I wake up at 6:00 to go brew beer, I know, man, I'm going to get to hang out with Aaron all day. We're going to make some badass beer. We're going to have a good time. And we always do. And it's just like those mornings that I used to wake up and I thought, it's Sunday. I'm going to brew homebrew today in the garage. It's the same thing, except we're doing it on this gigantic level. All of the magic and all the science and all the art of it is there at this bigger level. And we're seeing the fruits of our labors in when we go to one of the places that sells our beers and word gets around in there that we're the guys who brewed it, it's like being a musician.
Yeah.
Like people are coming up to you telling you, "Oh my God, I love this stuff," and there's this weird gratification that comes from that I'm not going to lie. It's very, very cool, and it fires me up to brew every time we do.
There's something amazing about being paid to do something you love and doing it well enough that people pay you.
Yeah.
It's
and
astounding.
ask you to sign
is what it
boobs.
is.
Yeah. First time I was asked to sign boobs, that's when I knew I
Oh wait, I don't get to sign boobs.
I did.
Not yet.
Was, yeah.
Not yet.
Not yet.
Now I'll just have to wait till closing time. I never stay around for closing time anymore.
Yeah.
We just gotta get up and go for a beer.
That's right.
That's the crazy
Gotta
thing.
be up.
We had this conversation. It was off camera after our last episode that went off the rails. But we were talking about how when you see musicians, guys playing in a club, and you burn the place down, and you think, man, those got to be the coolest guys in the world to party with. Nope, we're all geeks, and guys like Tim, the guitar virtuoso, spent their entire high school career sitting on the edge of the bed trying to learn Eric Johnson songs.
Yep. That's you don't know how true that is.
There is not. Yeah,
I always figured him back in the day for more like Styx or something.
No, it was. I had strange musical tastes as a teenager, man. I spanned a wide gamut, just like I do today. But that's another subject for another podcast.
So we fight over the Amazon Echo at the shop.
When my wife and I can't imagine that.
Alexa,
I did hear
play
you guys.
Doodad by Webb Wilder. Yeah.
I did hear you guys got to go through all of Webb Wilder. In fact,
Yeah.
I just got his autographed credo.
Nice.
I finally got it framed. Work hard, rock hard, eat hard, sleep hard, grow big, wear glasses if you need them.
We love you, Webb
Webb.
Wilder. I hope you see this someday and you hear all of your songs that we cover. We love you, man.
I'm hoping to, while we can, we get to play a gig with Webb. So.
Oh yeah, that would be a dream come true.
But yeah, it's a fantastic feeling. You guys are doing a great job of it. This is
Glad you like it.
Special thing, man. I'm really enjoying it. Where are you guys? Where's your brew? Where do I get it?
I actually have a list of everywhere that we are available currently in Midland. Now we've got.
Oh, good.
It's
starting to get hard to remember.
Yeah, I prepared ahead of time. So we're working on 3 other places that will probably come on pretty quickly. So it'll be those 3 plus these ones that I'm naming right now where we are on tap. In Midland, Texas, we are on tap at Triple Threat, Johnny Carino's, Basin Burger, the Buffalo Nickel, the Airport Bar at Midland International Airport, Opal's Table, the Tilted Kilt, the Beer Garden, where they have tons of taps of ours, as well as at Buffalo Nickel, and Grub Burger.
Right on.
That's where we are.
Grub Burger as of yesterday, actually.
Yeah. So just go in there,
Congrats, gentlemen.
Go into any of those places, ask for us by name, say, I want Eccentric beers. What do you have from Eccentric on tap? They will tell you they'll have 1 to 6 taps of Eccentric beer. Our tap handle is a wooden, beautiful coffin-shaped
yeah, I saw that.
Tap handle with a Texas emblem on the top.
And that's the
You can't miss
gold?
it. That's all of them.
All of them.
Okay.
Our tap handles are actually designed so we can actually unscrew the little plastic piece and trade out artwork as we need to.
Through the magic of modern filmmaking, the tap handle will appear right here. Boom. There it is.
Yeah.
Eccentric Brewing.
All right. Cheers, boys.
Fantastic,
This
guys.
was fun.
Thank you.
Yes, this is excellent.
See you guys next time.
Yeah.
Hopefully
See
I'll
y'all
be
next
on
time.
it.